Um, Welcome to another video of Professional Trade. My name is Professor Khan, and today I want to talk about in this final video, hopefully for tonight, I want to talk about this recent news, which was that basically after Trump won the election, America's richest people gained a $60 billion overnight. So I think it was America's top 10 richest billionaires. They gained $60 billion overnight after Trump won the election. Okay. And so now, right now, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, and the other guy's named Larry Ellison, three of them combined have a net worth which is larger than the bottom half of America's population. And I mean, it's reaching insane levels, right? You're talking about a country of close to 400 million people, and about three guys own more wealth than the bottom 200 million people. And look, someone might call me communist, someone might call me leftist and all this stuff. But at the end of the day, Hitler was a fascist. He was a champion of capitalism, oligopolic capitalism, where a few business leaders had most of the market share in the industries. I'm not saying Trump is Hitler, but clearly he promotes oligopolic capitalism, where a few people are basically given the biggest market share in the industries. And so like the thing is like when you have such a top heavy wealth distribution, right? Inverted pyramid, you can just flick it and it falls over because what happens at times of war? People are just not gonna fight for you. The people will realize the top bottom, they're not gonna go and fight for you in war to fight for this bunch of three rich dudes who owns more wealth than the bottom half, right? They're not gonna do it. And that's the problem. When you make your country top heavy and there's war, it usually ends badly for you. Okay, Hitler, it was the same thing with Hitler because it was top heavy. There was a bunch of people at the top that was making all the decisions for the country. And so basically, the thing had to crumble because there wasn't a real consultation with the public in Germany. And yeah, and you can look throughout history, whether it's the Mughal Empire, the Ottoman Empire, the British, and their monarchy, and the grade of their monarchy, and all that. And then you can anything you just look throughout history. Whenever the empire becomes top heavy, it crumbles. Okay, whether it's from a force inside or a force outside the nation, and that's basically what America is experiencing right now. And here's the thing, guys. You have, um, you know, especially in Western countries, they hate the commies, right? They hate the socialists, the commies. And if you talk to people who hate the commies, the socialists, it's usually people who are baby boomers, who grew up with Soviet Union. So people who were born after 1990s in a low middle class family or in a poor family, they love socialists. They love the leftists. They love the commies because they didn't grow up with Soviet Union. They didn't grow up with white picket fence, middle class, you know, food on the table every night, warm bed, warm heating, and you know what I mean, right? So people who are below the age of 30 who grew up in a low middle class family or in a poor neighborhood, they are they love the commies. They don't mind the commies. They don't mind the socialists. They hate strongly the fascist or the rich oligopolists, the monopolist, and also immigrants, right? Immigrants love socialism. And here's the thing. I mean, the problem with socialism is the only way to maintain it is through violence, right? When you're paying a doctor the same salary you're paying a car mechanic, and many few people will go and work all those years to be a doctor. They'll just be a car mechanic. That's the problem with socialism. If you're valuing different skills at different level with the same value, you're giving the same value to a doctor as you're to your car mechanic. You know, that's basically the fundamental issue with socialism. And the fundamental issue with oligopolic capitalism, which is basically what's going on in the Western world right now, is that you have few people at the top which are making all the decisions. And, you know, it's this facade of democracy that you guys have, but the truth is, it's basically a few people at the top. Elon Musk is making all these decisions for Trump right now. He's helping Trump to make all the decisions. And so you have this oligopolic system, and it doesn't end well either because you're basically surrounding yourself with a lot of yes men who are trying to protect themselves and keep their market share in their own industry. That's basically what happened with Hitler. If you read throughout, Hitler surrounded himself with smart people, like industry leaders, smart people, they had, and just feel like people who are like genuine, who made genuine progress in science, in automobiles, in other industries. So Hitler surrounded himself with smart people who were smart leaders in their own industry, but they were more focused on keeping their market share in their own industry. They were not focused on giving Hitler the right advice. And so Hitler was just getting a lot of yes man responses, basically. And the thing just turned upside down, basically, because no one wanted to challenge Hitler. When times are tough, everyone went their own ways, and Hitler was left in the bunker all alone with his generals. And that's the problem with these oligopolies. They only care about themselves. They probably have seven, second, third, fourth, fifth homes in separate places around the world. The moment times are tough, they're gonna flee. Okay, so oligopolic system is not good because you're giving too much of the country's resources uh, in the hands of such a small number of people that even if they don't screw it up, they're gonna be so protective of it that they're not gonna give the leader of the country the best solution or the most honest answer because they're most focused on protecting their large resources. And because you're giving them such a large share of the pie of the country, they'll likely hedge their risk against the country by selling off some of that pie to other places around the world where they can have backup homes. That's basically what people do. People are selfish and they have self-interest and they're driven by self-interest. And so the problem with communism is that you're treating a doctor the same as a mechanic, as a teacher, as a school teacher, and so people don't want to uh, work hard and educate themselves in highly skilled jobs because the payment is same as the lowly skilled job, and so the country doesn't progress from low skilled work to high skilled work, right? That's the problem with communism, absolute communism, like in Soviet Union, right? Because most people they don't progress to high paying jobs because there's no incentive to do high paying jobs because you're basically paid the same in a general sense. I mean, yeah, there are like special grants if the government wants something built like a spacecraft, that's a different thing. But in general, there's no incentive to work harder, basically, in communism. And so the entire country productivity drops sharply after a period of time. And that's when the thing collapses. It's an economic collapse. The communism is leads ends with an economic collapse, and crony oligopolic capitalism ends with um societal, moral, and often military collapse. Because it doesn't matter how much technology you have, how much automation, AI, drones, and whatever, you're gonna need people. Okay, if you want to go to war, you're gonna need people to operate those systems, to make those small decisions in all these networks. Okay, you're gonna need people. And so, with the problem with crony capitalism is that it ends with such a low morale among the bottom percentiles of the people that they just, even if they fight for you, they're gonna find ways to sabotage you because they just hate the country because the country has done basically nothing for them except give to the top few. And so there's a deep hidden anger, resentment. And yeah, so basically communism ends with an economic collapse, and crony capitalism ends with a military collapse in most cases. That's pretty much what I've seen throughout history. And I was reading that like today, for example, I was reading the history about the Mughal Empire, and they're talking about Babur, how he led this bandits of outsiders to go into India and conquer India. And then his descendants, you had Jahangir, Akbar, conquered the rest of India. They built these great palaces. And then, but after Akbar, it basically went downhill from there. They had Shah Jahan, was still okay. He was still a good leader. He could still fight some good wars. But by the time they went to the sixth leader, the guy's name was Aurangzeb, basically. He was basically paying people off to win wars. His military was so inequipped and so low in morale that the only way Aurangzeb could fight and win any war was by paying off the enemy and paying off bribing certain people inside the enemy to sabotage the enemy's operations, which didn't work because there's only so many bribes you can give out to the enemy camp, and there's only so many traders in the enemy camps, right? And so that wasn't a sustainable method, and then the entire thing collapsed. And yeah, like Mughal Empire was the best idea of crony capitalism. A few Mughals at the top, having dominance of the entire country's economy, basically. And so you started with a strong military, but then people become so low in morale because they're basically, they're poor, their lifestyle isn't improving, and they're seeing all this, rich elites, a bunch of them having so much wealth, in the palaces. And then now you're sending them to fight. They're just not interested in fighting. They have to fight. I mean, they get paid, but they're just not high in morale. Okay. And then you basically have to bribe the opponent's part of the army to get them to sabotage their own operations. And yeah, that doesn't work too long because there's only so many traders you can find in the opponent's camp. And yeah, so basically USA is in that stage right now where its own military doesn't want to fight any war. So it has to bribe traders in the opponent's camp, and Ukraine was in Russia's camp. And now they've found Zelensky to be a traitor that they can bribe to fight their opponent, which is Russia. And Taiwan was in the past, Taiwanese people or Chinese people are close. Now they're basically trying to bribe Taiwanese to fight the Chinese. And this is basically even the Romans. When the Constantinople fell, the people who labeled themselves as Romans living inside Constantinople, they didn't have a solid army to fight with. Because even though the Constantinople emperor was rich, it was so top heavy that people in the bottom were so poor and broke that there was no morale of to fight. They had to bring a fighting army from the Western Europe to have some sort of combat army to fight the Ottomans. But that was nowhere near because they kept asking for more money. So the only thing the Constantinople Emperor could do was basically try to bribe army generals instead of the Ottoman army, which didn't work. They had high morale and high integrity, so they didn't take the bribe, and then the entire thing collapsed. And that's basically, if you look throughout any empire, it ends with a top heavy, few people controlling most of the country's resources, uh, system, and the bottom basically living in absolute poverty. And a war happens, usually with another country, another empire, and the bottom doesn't want to fight your war. Okay, they just don't want to be participate. Even if they do, they're low in morale. And then you try to do this bribery, like bribing Ukraine, bribing opponents' camps, traitors, like Ukraine and then Taiwan, and you're trying to bribe your opponent camp's traitors. You're trying to find traitors to bribe, in your opponent's camp. And when you can't find any more traitors and your own army is too low in morale to fight, that's the moment your enemies will charge at you. And that's the moment it all ends. Okay, that's what happened. The Ottomans waited until no more bribe came in for the generals. And then the Ottoman army realized, okay, this is it. Now is the moment to charge. They have shown all their cards. They clearly don't have an army of their own. Now is the time to attack. And their bribes are done. And so now we are in the phase of bribing the opponent's camp. And we're in that declining phase of the Western world. They're trying to bribe the traitors in the opponent's camp. and that'll end, and then it's done. Once the bribing process stops, and you try to, stimulate your country's bottom half to fight your war, most people will see through it and not fight, or will have low morale, or will try to sabotage whatever. And yeah, that's it. That's the end of the empire. So the problem with communism is there's an economic collapse, but the empire, or the uh, core of the empire, stays. Okay. So there was an economic collapse in China in the 1960s, even after the fall of the Soviet Union. Russia's core, military and culture still remained. So the core of the empire doesn't leave. But the problem with crony capitalism is it's a collapse of the entire system. Okay. It's a collapse of the economy, the military, the society, the culture, everything. It's the collapse of the entire system. Okay. That's the problem with crony capitalism versus communism. Communism, it's usually just a collapse of the economy. The cultures, usually most of them, the remnants of the culture at least will stay behind in a lot of cases. So yeah, I just want to talk about it. It's an interesting fact. I think this bribery phase is coming to an end. I think after this bribery phase of the opponent camps traitors like Ukraine and Taiwan, we'll get to the final phase of the Western decline, which is the boosting your poor people's morale so that you're prepping them for war and making sure their morals are high enough to fight in the war. And that's basically what populism is all about. It's not about making the people richer. You're trying to fight a war against the rest of the world, and you need a, you know, population in the bottom half, in the bottom percentiles, who are motivated enough to fight those wars. And right now, America is not motivated to fight any war after all the done in the last 2, 3 decades, right? And I think that's exactly the next phase that Trump is going to be part of. We'll see how much people buy into this fighting, BS. Because as much as Trump claims he's a guy of peace, he wants peace, he is a guy who's preparing for World War III. He sees the writing on the wall. He knows China, Russia are not going to back down, even if the war in Ukraine ends or the war in Middle East ends. He knows this is just the beginning of a bigger conflict. He's preparing the US a manufacturing base for that, and he's trying to make America's morale again, moral high again, because you need people to fight a war. Okay, no matter how much AI technology you have. Okay, Ukraine is learning that the hard way right now. And yeah, that's it for me for this video. I'll come back tomorrow again, and until then, peace.